following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio streaming and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for going good crazy. This week, I'm doing another list because the weather has gotten nicer, the pressures to socialize have gotten greater, and so I wanted to deliver a message on behalf of my fellow introverts. Dear extroverts, stop trying to force us to be like you. It's not that all introverts like me, yes, I am an introvert. It's not that we hate people. We quite like people. We just have smaller social batteries, do better in one-on-one groups, and need alone time to recharge. We are not fueled by being around the masses the way extroverts were. I was at a mall over the weekend. A busy mall. Shout out to Fairview Mall. The food court there is killer. I love that. As much as I love the chana masala out of Maya, shout out to Amaya, there were a few moments where the sheer number of people overwhelmed me. Now, I'm not alone. Introverts are somewhere between 25% and 40% of the population, or that's a big margin, I know, and yes, it's a minority no matter which number you take, but it's a large minority. 1 in 4 to 2 out of 3, it's 1 out of 3 people, more than that, are introverts. So I'll try to keep the incoming rant as brief as possible, but this is an important baseline for what we're going to talk about. For years, there was a reinforcing bias in the field of psychology regarding personality traits and whether they could predict success. Psychologists found that extroverts tended to do better in life, and therefore the theory formed that extroversion was a success skill, as opposed to the idea that the world was just built for extroverts, while introversion was a problem that needed to be trained out of people for their own good instead of, changing the system so it benefited more people. Here's the problem with the idea of extroversion good, introversion bad. Introverts like me can fake extroversion when we need to. I'm doing it right now. But that isn't the same thing as actually being an extrovert. While personality can shift over a person's life, there's really no way to brute force changes in a person's personality without them seeing the benefits of the change, at which point it becomes not brute forcing. It hasn't been that long since psychologists realized that introversion is actually beneficial for important tasks like computer programming or research. So in a lot of places, introversion is not just treated as abnormal, but it's treated as something that's actively bad or harmful. Introversion is often confused with being antisocial. And like I said off the top, it's not. We like people, just in smaller doses, and we need breaks. Now, because introversion is treated like the worst of the two main personality options, the structures of society favor extroverts, like I said before, which makes it even harder for introverts to socialize. So I thought I'd do a show about 10 things introverts would like extroverts to know about the things that drive us crazy. And I want to be clear before we start, this isn't all extroverts. There are some lovely extroverted people that I know. These are just things that, you might not be aware this is the effect it has. And I'm going to be blunt at times because that's, more of a catharsis for us introverts. So let's get started with number 10. Extroverts tend to violate our boundaries, and it is not for our own good. I asked the members of my highly introverted Discord server what their biggest social pet peeves were, and the bulk of them were about boundary violations, unwanted hugs, cheek kisses, insisting that people smile more, comments about socialization, and, air quotes, advice. To an extrovert, the thinking is all of this behavior is I'm being friendly. And that's the problem. You're trying to be nice to an introvert by treating them like an extrovert And that isn't accepting us for who we are. Now, some introverts like hugs. I happen to be a hugger. But I hate being forced into physical contact with people. The minute a physical gesture is expected, or worse, demanded, it starts becoming extremely uncomfortable for me. When social norms insist that you touch other people to be polite, it further drains the social batteries of introverts who don't like the hugging, kissing, backslapping, playful insults, and well-meaning unsolicited advice. More on that later. If you want your introverted friends to spend extrovert amounts of time socializing, doing things that make that easier instead of harder is the most logical course. Being friendly means being a friend, and friends care about the comfort of other friends. It doesn't take much to ask, would you like some advice? It's okay to say no before proceeding with said advice. And if you're really such an adept social butterfly, you're capable of assessing signs of discomfort in the people around you. If your more introverted friend goes even quieter when you keep calling them that nickname you've had for him based on an embarrassing event in the 5th grade, maybe it's time to knock that off, oh master of social environment extrovert. Moving on to number 9. Are we warmed up? Woo, I'm warmed up. Yeah, introverts are going, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, extroverts are going, what? Anyway, number 9 on the list of stuff introverts want extroverts to know is driving us crazy is connected to the number 10 boundary busting reality. It's number 9 is often a reaction to a boundary violation, but sometimes it's not. It's about the reality that introverts tend to use fewer words. Number 9, extroverts accuse us of being rude, too blunt, annoying, or confusing when we do speak. There's nothing worse for an introvert than an extrovert with a judgmental streak. It's extremely encouraging to hear, you never talk, only to hear, oh my God, rude, when you finally do open your mouth. Trust me. Us introverts have heard how terrible our social skills are our entire lives, even when they're not. Yeah, some people listening to the show is like, what do you mean your social skills are terrible? Or some of you, yeah, your social skills are terrible. Word I can't say on the radio. But yeah, I'm a professional communicator, and I still used to get told all the time that my social skills sucked. So instant criticism of the way we speak when we do speak is a great way to make us not want to speak again. Because introverts don't talk to fill space. And I understand that there's a social function to small talk. I'm not criticizing that. Just, we don't do it as much. We actually think and choose our words before speaking. Unlike a lot of extroverts who figure things out externally. You know, that whole, I want to bounce some ideas off people. Here's the thing, extroverts. If you're one of those people who's talking a lot, if you're just speaking your mind, bouncing ideas around, people are more used to only listening to, I'll go out and say about 30% of what you say. Sorry, extroverts. It's true. There's a lot of filler in what you say, and so people at the best of times only half listen. See, I went up from 30% to a half. I'm being agreeable. The upside of that is that people who aren't really listening don't get as easily offended. Because introverts say less. Every word we use packs a greater punch. So we like more benefit of the doubt and less negative judgments of our intent from extroverts, because an introvert communicates in 5 words what would take an extrovert 20. See, also, yes, we may need to backfill some, but we're not confusing. We're not annoying. Right? Yeah, there's some give and take here, okay? I've put a lot of work into explaining why I'm saying something before I say it to minimize misunderstandings. But I've found the extrovert communication style bias so strong that I'll be very clear about my intentions for saying something. I will say, this is why I am saying this, only for an extrovert to insist I had a totally different motivation, because every other person they've ever known has meant something different when they said what I said. And it's usually something passive aggressive instead of just the clear surface meaning of the words. And I chose those words because of their clear literal meaning, because that's what I was actually trying to say, no ulterior motive. So not only are introverts slower to talk, but we tend to get stepped on and talked over when we do. So when extroverts finally start noticing we've said something, we're already frustrated because we just got stepped on 5 times when we were trying to make our point. And then we get criticized for that frustration. And yeah, okay, yes, there's ways of expressing frustration, but then we have to hear about how the extrovert is frustrated too, because they didn't like how we said what we said. And hearing that takes 10 minutes. But we're not supposed to feel criticized because the extrovert is just telling us how they feel. Meanwhile, the entire thing that we, the introvert, were trying to say that was important enough for us to finally open our mouths about, well, that got totally lost in the sheer volume of words that the extrovert used to explain why they were frustrated because we were frustrated. Now, interrupting and telling us how you feel while not listening to how we're feeling are different issues, and those are things that also drive introverts nuts about some extroverts, and we'll get to that after the break. Do you have a story you think would be good for the show? Are you interested in sponsoring the show? Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. At nottherapyshow on X, that's Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. And if you want to kick some money to my coffee, it's Red Liana K. I have to start referencing that. Anyway, we'll be back after the break. 10 things that introverts want extroverts to know drives us crazy when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking about 10 things introverts would like extroverts to know about, well, I'll be more polite than I was before the break, taking your normal status for granted and being, well, kind of pushy, right? And it wears us out. Before the break, I talked about number 10, extroverts tend to violate introverts' boundaries. And no, it's not for our own good. Thank you. 9, extroverts accuse us of being rude, too blunt, annoying, or confusing when we do speak, just because we don't talk to them the way they do. And in that conversation about number 9, I stumbled into 2 more points. The over-expressing that some extroverts do, especially about, well, what they call feelings. More on that. But then there's interrupting. And let's be ironic and start with interrupting. So number 8 is extroverts tend to interrupt. No, you do. The studies show it. Now, it's not that introverts never interrupt. It's that extroverts do it habitually. And it's not an intent to interrupt. I study communication because so much of it is weird. And I notice when you have a bunch of extroverts talking, they talk over each other as a habit, and it seems to work out, right? Well, introverts tend to err on the side of avoiding interrupting, which means leaving longer gaps in communication that extroverts then take as an invitation to talk. Now, I am acutely aware of this. Because, I did conventional, off-the-cuff, non-scripted television and talk radio for years. And then I switched to doing a lot of stuff online. And this online stuff included doing streams. And I got accused of interrupting and derailing. And if you hear what sounds like a cat yelling in the background, yes, she is being very extroverted right now. Now, when I got accused of interrupting and derailing, I wasn't intending on interrupting. I was doing my best to talk the way I was told normal professional people talk on things intended for the public to hear. But if you get outside of the circles of those egotistical influencers, You know, the ones online that nobody can stand? Yeah. Introverted social norms actually rule the internet. Normal had literally changed on me from TV and radio to internets. Getting a word in edgewise around extroverts is really hard, at least for introverts. So being more dominant in conversations had become a habit for me, even though it was an uncomfortable one. Which is why that criticism, you're derailing, you're interrupting, it was mortifying. Like I wanted to crawl under a rock. Now, was it true? Well, not the derailing part. You know, derailing implies an element of deliberateness. You know, there's a difference between a tangent and a derail. But interrupting? Yeah, I probably was. If you watch cable news or listen to talk radio, people are just interrupting each other all the time. So because I'd gotten so used to the rule of interrupt or be interrupted, that interrupting had become a normal thing, even a good thing, right? It was a dominance thing, right? Now, some would argue that this has to do with being a woman in male-dominated professions, and okay, maybe that's a factor. But I like to check these things out, not just assume. And I noticed that men, at least extroverted men, interrupt and talk over each other all the time too. And it's not the sort of affirming interjections that women do, you know, where you, yep, absolutely, you're so right, where the speaker is supposed to just continue as just you go girl, right? There's this hierarchy that just forms among men, that guys somehow just know who gets to talk the most, and who, when they speak, everyone else is quiet, right? They also know I find them foolish, but these friendly insults, the ones that, you know, guys can call each other, but if you ever called a guy that, oh Lord, it would be the worst thing you've ever said in your life. Yeah, somehow that's acceptable in these all the men are talking at once dynamic. And then there's this like understood, unwritten thing about who gets to interrupt and when. And this might be where the women get interrupted more at work thing comes from. You know, the unfortunate reality that alpha men, even though that term is never used accurately, the alpha men, or the ones that are trying real hard to be alpha men, tend to treat women as subservient or a guest. Therefore, anytime a woman opens her mouth in the masculine hierarchy, she's supposed to realize that she's at the bottom unless she's an honorary guy with all the stuff that goes with that. And I've never been able to figure this stuff out in a way that I can explain. And I've heard from a lot of introverted guys that they can't figure it out either. They don't like it any more than I do, which is why it's not just women, right? These guys just stay at the bottom of this hierarchy, and they don't like the way that feels. Now, it might be because girls are more socialized to actively include others, whereas boys are encouraged to compete. But if you've got an introverted friend, putting a little effort into making sure they get a chance to talk and actually finish their thoughts, even if it takes them longer to get out, this will go a long way towards encouraging your introverted friend to socialize more. I've noticed, though, that giving other people some space in conversations, well, this gets swept away in the sea of self-expression, right? We talk a lot as a culture about freedom of speech, and we talk almost not at all about the importance of having the patience to listen. And really, if everyone's talking and no one's listening, what's the point of all that speech? It's free, but maybe it means free in the way of it doesn't really have any value, right? Is all this talking really doing anything if no one's listening? Now, I want to be nuanced. moving from the interrupting, which everybody can understand. Nobody likes to be interrupted, right? I want to be nuanced about this next thing that drives introverts crazy about extroverts, because there is a difference between the point I want to make and a fawn response, which is a panic response, which is something completely different. A fawn response, where someone instinctively people pleases to avoid conflict, is not what I'm talking about here. So as we move into the next section, please give people benefit of the doubt. Eliminate the possibility of a fawn response causing them to overtalk. I do know a lot of introverts that are both very introverted and overtalk because of a fawn response. And it leads them to be very misunderstood. And extroverts can do it too. Can something be both a fawn response and extrovert conditioned overtalking? Yeah, it can. So this one's, a bit of a tightrope. Let's tease it out. Number 7, overtalking about feelings without actually mentioning feelings. Extroverts. This is going to be another tough thing for extroverts to swallow. Introverts have been found to be better listeners on the whole. Obviously, individual cases vary. Some of us, we get too lost in our own heads and we can't listen. But the studies have shown that extroverts, despite their reputation for superior social skills, aren't as good at listening. At least they're not perceived to be as good at listening. And I've found that includes listening to themselves. I've had numerous conversations with extroverts where they literally cannot recall the thing they just said. Because while it was the words they used, it wasn't literally what they meant, because they didn't think before they spoke. They were bouncing ideas around. Let's face it, when you're talking, you're not really listening. It's very hard to do both at the same time. So many extroverts don't realize that listening takes a lot of energy. And that's because listening is an underrated skill to begin with. A lot of people don't fully devote themselves to the activity. But again, data shows introverts are better listeners than extroverts on the whole. And as somebody, me, who listens for a living, I can honestly say that listening properly takes work and energy. So if you talk a lot to begin with, and your solution to a perceived misunderstanding is to talk more, you might be making the misunderstanding worse, because it was created in the first place, at least in part, because you talked too much. Now, this is especially significant in conversations about feelings. I bring this up a lot, but many people talk about feelings, allegedly, while referencing absolutely zero actual feelings. If you're someone who listens to understand as opposed to listening to respond, when you hear, I feel, you usually listen very carefully to what comes next. And if someone talks for 5 minutes and doesn't mention a single actual feeling, you get confused and don't know what to make of what they just said. What exactly are they trying to tell you? But asking some extroverts what they're trying to say often results in another 10-minute speech without any more clarity. And it's worse when you get all these, negative, critical sounding statements wrapped up with I'm not saying it's your fault, or I don't think you meant to thing. I mean, I was reminded of how difficult that is to take. Right. I'm not saying it's your fault, but I felt extremely criticized by what you said, and I don't think you meant to make me cry, but I was crying the whole time. And how the heck do you not feel blamed in that, right? If they don't think it was your fault, if they don't think you meant to, why are they talking about it so much? There's only so many times you can hear, I'm not saying it's your fault, before you start wondering if the overtalker is telling you the truth. And I'm not trying to be harsh here. I'm not trying to mock anyone. I'm not. if this is difficult to hear, it's because it's difficult to be on the receiving end of, right? Especially when there's a problem that needs to be solved. It is exhausting, traipsing through the weeds of all this extra verbiage. It's amazing to me how many words some extroverts can say while conveying little to no meaning other than vibes. And I say this as somebody who had to realize that, especially when people are just listening, it's good to say something multiple ways so that, first of all, repetition, they get it, listening instead of reading, where people can go over a line multiple times if they want to. But also, sometimes people will understand it if you say it the second way as opposed to the first, right? But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about when someone is just saying more and more and more, and a person is staring at them, and they're clearly confused. And it's amazing how some extroverts seem completely oblivious to the fact that the listener is confused. It really isn't that hard to slow down and take things in smaller pieces if there isn't some sort of underlying trauma. If you think that it is, you're trying to outrun a judgment, that might be that fawn response I was talking about off the top, right? Even if that's so, overwhelming an introvert with a lot of words, then criticizing us for being overwhelmed, that doesn't do anything helpful or productive. Now, overwhelm's a separate issue, and I want to talk about that after the break. We need breathers. We need to give extroverts time to process the way us introverts like our processing time. Don't get it from extroverts sometimes. Anyway, we'll continue after the break on our list of 10 things that drive introverts crazy about talking to extroverts. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. At nottherapyshow on X, that's Twitter, former Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. We'll be back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking about 10 things that drive introverts crazy about communicating with extroverts. So far, we've covered violation of boundaries. It's not for our own good. Accusing us of being rude, too blunt, annoying, or confusing when us introverts do speak. Interrupting and over-explaining, especially telling us how you feel with no actual feeling words. And as promised before the break, we're going to talk about number 6. Extroverts can sometimes be kind of jerks about introverts being overwhelmed. Now, extroverts can also get socially worn out, eventually. So some think that they get it. They understand introvert overwhelm, right? It's like them overscheduling themselves and feeling tired. No, I'm really not sure it's possible for an extrovert to understand introvert overwhelm, because it happens based on a degree of socialization that society treats as normal. Therefore, we feel like there's something wrong with us when we're exhausted by it. I don't think extroverts can relate to it. The same way I can't imagine being fueled by being in crowds of people, by needing that, right? By getting depressed if you spend too much time alone. It takes a lot of alone time for me to feel like, oh man, I'm feeling cut off from the world, But I accept that some people need a lot more people time than I do. I accept that. I just have no idea how it actually works. A real misconception among extroverts is the thinking that introverts can just push through that social overwhelm. The problem with trying to push through any kind of overwhelm is it makes the overwhelm worse. To put it lightly, it's not fun when I'm overwhelmed and people start making fun of me or criticizing me for being zoned out. When an introvert is pushed to respond while overwhelmed, well, sometimes we snap because we're struggling to process and we're approaching or we've hit the point of panic. And then we get criticized for that too by an extrovert. Just telling you the truth, just telling you how I feel, just trying to help, right? Please don't do that. Most introverts are sympathetic to the fact that extroverts need social time or you get depressed. Again, something we can't relate to, even though we accept it. So please give us the same dignity by giving us a minute when crowds get too much and maybe letting us bow out of things occasionally without hearing about it, because sometimes it just gets too much and we cannot help it. And don't expect us to remember things you told us when we were overwhelmed. We're likely not going to remember precisely because our brains were in a state of internally screaming. While we're on that subject, let's talk about the fifth thing extroverts do that drives introverts crazy, bad crazy. Number 5, telling us we didn't tell you something that we very much did tell you. You were just too busy talking and you didn't hear us. Alternatively, we tried to tell you, but we couldn't get a word in edgewise. I'm convinced that for some extroverts, the purpose of having a conversation is to get in a room and everybody makes noise, right? Actually retaining anything is sort of secondary to the exercise. And again, not all introverts, just some. You know, that guy at parties and sporting events who just keeps going, woo! You know that guy? Sometimes followed by the word beer, right? Yeah, that guy. We all know that guy. So, based on that guy, if you're trying to tell someone something while they're going, woo, beer, right? Yeah, it is possible. Extrovert yelling woo beer. We did try to tell you, but you didn't hear us. It was too hard to get your attention, to interject, you know, or we tried to tell you and we got interrupted by beer and we didn't actually get to the part you're saying, you didn't tell me. But some of the time, maybe you just consumed too much beer and you just forgot. For introverts, that's a unique form of frustration. And here's why, okay? Talking's hard to begin with. It's difficult and discouraging if there's no retention. It's even worse when we get told we didn't say anything because we know we said something because we know it was hard for us. Or we know, yeah, we didn't say anything. We tried real hard, but we got interrupted 6 times and never got it out. If you do, that you didn't tell me, you need to speak up more. An introvert's probably going to tell you even fewer things because why bother? It's going to land with, you didn't tell me anyway. You know, and this probably gives some context to the number 4 way, the fourth from the top way that extroverts drive introverts utterly crazy. It's the advice, just be yourself, or just put yourself out there. Yeah, no. When we're our introverted self, we're told that it's going to ruin our chances of success in life because we're the bad introvert self instead of the good extrovert self. So, you know that just be yourself, just put yourself out there. Take that advice and do kindly shove it up your social butterfly backside. If we were ourselves, we'd stay quietly in a corner and read a book. Or we'd stay home quietly and read a book. Or go for a walk in a quiet forest, possibly with a book. We wouldn't be at bloody speed dating. Don't tell someone who is already out of their comfort zone to just be themselves. They are already in a state of feeling forced to not be themselves. Similarly, just put yourself out there is not useful advice to an introvert. You might as well tell a fish to fly. Even so-called flying fish don't actually fly. They just leap out of the water and glide through the air temporarily to escape predators. That's actually a pretty decent metaphor for introvert socialization in crowds. We do it, but we have to. But the entire experience is an exercise in a predator, chuck out of the water, fly free, splash, right? Again, it's not that we don't like people. We just don't like too many people at once. The problem with putting ourselves out there is that, it's the first thing I said off the top. It usually comes with numerous boundary violations. So it's really hard to just go, oh yeah, just put yourself out there. Like, it's so easy. Instead of just put yourself out there, just be yourself. Offer to go out with the introvert to help them navigate all the additional social choices. Because I'm going to let you in on a thing about introvert socialization. Often the hardest part of going somewhere is literally going there. It's leaving your house and going into a new space. Once you're in, once you're past the front door, it sometimes gets easier because showing up is the part where you're going, okay, this is the thing I can control. After I'm in there, it's going to be out of my control and there will be boundary violations. So once you're in and you're already having your boundaries violated, well, you're just sort of rolling with it, right? Rolling in the deep. Yeah. That's a hard truth. It's kind of, wow. Gonna sit with it. Now let's go to the break. We got 3 more after our final break. So let's come back and rip that Band-Aid off. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com, nottherapyshow.com, at nottherapyshow on socials. Or you can go to Red Liana K on Coffee and kick me a few bucks there if you want to directly support this show. When we come back, 3 more things that drive introverts crazy about dealing with extroverts. Some extroverts, others are lovely. When we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking about 10 things that drive introverts bad crazy about dealing with some, underline some, extroverts. And we've done 7 so far. They are: extroverts tend, number 10, to violate our boundaries, and it's not for our own good. Number 9, extroverts accuse us of being rude, too blunt, annoying, or confusing when we do speak. Number 8, extroverts tend to interrupt us introverts. Extro, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Number 7, extroverts over-explain, especially telling us how they felt, containing no actual feeling words. Number 6, extroverts can be a real jerk when us introverts get overwhelmed. Number 5, extroverts say, you didn't tell me, I didn't know. When either, you did tell them, they just weren't paying attention because they were too busy talking, or us introverts couldn't get a word in edgewise. We tried. And number 4, the extrovert platitudes of just put yourself out there and be yourself. Now, number 3, this might take a little unpacking, but this happens more often than you might think. Number 3 is extroverts referring to us introverts as antisocial or sociopathic. And this might be shocking to you more empathic extroverts out there that anyone would do this. I assure you they do. It's partially because of that. He was quiet. He kept to himself, mass shooter stereotype. And that's exactly why it's not at all cool, right? It's up there with video games and violent movies. So many people watch that stuff, play that stuff. Lots of people are quiet. Quiet is not a predictor of, psychopathic antisocial behavior. It's just not. There's too many quiet people out there and too few people who do violent things. Right? You might think it's funny to make this connection because of the way media makes psychopathy seem sexy, But for an introvert who's already sensitive about the social stigma against introversion, it's just perpetuating the idea that introversion is a mental illness instead of just a less common form of a normal state of being, a perfectly healthy state of being, right? Number 2 is connected to that. Number 2, I mentioned this way off the top of the boundary violations, but it needed its own slot. Extroverts, please stop giving us unsolicited, air quotes, help, right? Don't set us up with your friends unless we ask. Don't spring a social gathering on us. Don't just stop by without calling first because you think we need a night out, right? Stop forcing us to suddenly socialize. You're not some manic pixie dream girl in an early 2000s Sundance Film Festival movie. Introversion isn't a disease to be cured. Like I said, it's a valid personality type. We want to socialize. We do. It just takes more out of us. The more we're forced to do it, the less we choose to. Us staying at home doesn't mean we're necessarily depressed the way you would be. In fact, forcing us to socialize too much might actually lead to us becoming depressed because our boundaries are not being respected. It's only help if it's actually helpful. No matter how well-meaning you are, please ask, please care whether introverts actually want this stuff. If your introverted friend says, hey, I need help getting dragged out, please just, I may kick and scream, but remind me I said this, that's one thing. But if you just decide you're going to fix your friend, please don't. It's not fixing anything. And this is where we come to our number one thing that extroverts do to introverts that drive us introverts bad, crazy. Let's recap before we do it. Okay, so number 10, violating our boundaries. It's not for our own good. Number 9, accusing us of being rude, too blunt, annoying, or confusing when we do finally open our mouths. Number 8, interrupting. Number 7, over-explaining. Number 6, being a jerk about us getting overwhelmed. Number 5, saying, you didn't tell me, I didn't know. Number 4, the platitudes of just put yourself out there, be yourself. Number 3, referring to us as antisocial or a sociopath. Number 2 is unsolicited help. And number 1, extroverts ghost us introverts because they're tired of us being a buzzkill or never wanting to do anything. And strangely, some extroverts, they love to talk unless it's actually about feelings, not the fake, I feel that you didn't do what I wanted, right? No, I feel blank, happy, sad, angry, pick your inside out character, right? Instead of having the potentially difficult conversation with your introvert friend about their comfort or discomfort with socialization, extroverts just ditch us when they find someone more fun, right? And I know a lot of introverts. I have a lot of clients, introverted clients, who live in fear of exactly this kind of abandonment. Now, don't get me wrong, extroverts. You have the right to hang out with or not hang out with anyone you want. But because introverts have fewer friends, this sucks really hard. You know, and the extrovert may think it's avoiding confrontation, which may have good intent, but ghosting, we know, has a lot of negative psychological impacts, especially when it happens in cycles. So, you know, it can contribute to anxiety, depression, and, you know, the person being ghosted questioning reality. So, okay, if someone's straight up abusive and tends to blow up when you try to have a conversation with them, fair. That's an understandable reason to ghost, right? The point is you tried to have the conversation. If you're just ditching someone, expect that to hurt, especially with someone who is introverted, who has fewer friends, but the relationships tend to be closer, and introverts are, tend to be more attached to their individual friends. So if you've thrown the word friend around with an introvert, and then you just suddenly drop them without a word, that is gonna hurt them. So don't throw the word friend around so liberally to begin with. But also, the minute you do consider someone your friend, a friend deserves trying to have the conversation. At least try. About, look, you don't seem to enjoy going to these parties, or you seem to not be having a good time. Is there something we can do differently, or should I just stop inviting you? If the person says, yeah, just stop inviting me to the parties, it's not ghosting, right? It's not. But just ghosting can make the introverted person feel like a failure. Is that your responsibility? No, absolutely it's not. But introverts are people, just like extroverts are, even though we're treated as weird and creepy, right? Yeah, the dreaded creepy word, that's another one. But I think that that fits in a way into number 3, antisocial or sociopathic. Anyway, we've only got a minute to go in the show-ish. So questions, comments, concerns, suggestions for a topic, another topic of a top 10 list or something otherwise. Liana at Not Therapy Show. NotTherapyShow.com is the website. If you forget how to spell my name, it's Lian as in Nancy A at NotTherapyShow.com or at Not Therapy on socials. I hope you enjoyed this program and we're feeling a little bit beat up, extroverts, because somebody just talked for, an hour straight with commercial breaks or 48 minutes on the web, and you're feeling a bit overloaded and overwhelmed, like, wow, that was a lot to process. Welcome to the world of being an introvert around extroverts. This has been an empathy exercise. I'm being snarky this episode. I think I'm working some stuff out. It has definitely been that first gasp of summer. Oh my God, so many people. That mall was so very crowded. What would a mall for introverts look like? All right, online shopping. I love you, online shopping. Anyway, thanks for listening this week. I don't know why it's so difficult for society to sort of get its collective head around the idea that some people need this stuff and other people need that stuff, and the fact that we're different is good. Diversity of viewpoint. Yeah, so good. Anyway, that's my time. Hope you enjoyed the show. Introverts, I know you feel loved. Extroverts, don't worry. Don't worry, I still love you. We're all good. Remember, your crazy and my crazy is only a problem if it's hurting us. See you next time.